Hello everyone, I'm back for another update here. Today is Saturday, I believe it's October 17th, 2025, and I'm currently on the top of Potts Mountain along the ridge, walking along the road that follows the ridge line on this beautiful middle October day. We did have our first frost 2 nights ago. But as you can see, this follows the ridge line of Potts Mountain. My plan today is I've already climbed up Potts Mountain. I'm going to descend further down and head home via Shoivas Run Wilderness, which borders this road off to the left further up. I believe it's right here too. To the left of this road is the wilderness area. This road forms a boundary. So I'm going to continue to talk about, this channel is focused on climate, weather, past, present, future. First of all, on October 17th, 1880, a blizzard hit the Great Plains of the U.S., burying them under feet of snow. Due to a low pressure sitting over the Missouri Valley. You don't see that sort of weather nowadays because the climate was cooler back in the late 1800s. And that corresponded to a period of low solar activity, several low solar cycles consecutively around that time period. Today we do see snow out west, but much of the eastern 2/3 of the U.S. is settling into a benign pattern once again of warm, dry conditions. As we head toward November, as I've been talking about, MJO manipulation, I am the only person that introduces a possibility out there that they could be messing with the MJO to keep it in the warmer phases. Nobody else talks about this. I'm the only person that seems to realize that weather is getting manipulated, at least to some extent. It's not all by accident that I'm walking out here in 70 plus temperatures in the middle of October here. I don't believe it's by accident, totally, or because of a warming climate. You hear talk of a typhoon hitting Alaska, for example, and the reason why they call it a typhoon, they want people again to buy into global warming. You see now typhoons are starting to hit Alaska. Never happened before, but did a typhoon really hit Alaska? Was Alaska really hit by an actual typhoon? No. I've read article after article that makes it sound like a typhoon hit Alaska. Why are the articles written like this? Because they want people to believe global warming means flooding in Alaska all the time due to typhoons. Was this storm really a typhoon? I watched it on the images. Is what actually happened with it. I watched it. It was a huge, huge bomb cyclone that formed off Kamchatka in Russia, and it moved toward the southwestern Alaska across the Bering Sea. It was a huge mega storm of monumental proportions. And it just so happened that there was a typhoon in the Pacific moving northeastward away from Japan that got sucked up into this low pressure system. And it got sheared apart. The remnants were carried eastward toward the Aleutians, and then along the... I watched closely where the actual remnants of the typhoon ended up, and the remnants moved across the southern coast of Alaska. They did not move up into the areas that got flooded. This flooding was caused by an extremely strong low pressure system that moved across the Bering Sea, so strong that it created a storm surge that drowned out villages, and people have lost everything along the western coast of Alaska, southwestern coast. It raised up the storm surge 6 feet, but was that due to an actual typhoon? No, it was due to a very strong bomb cyclone type low pressure system that moved across the Bering Sea. Here comes another person. Gotta get off. Pretty busy today because it's a Saturday up here, and say the leaves are at peak color. People are out here. But getting back to what I was talking about, it was a bomb cyclone that caused all this destruction. It wasn't an actual typhoon that hit Alaska. It was far from it. It was a very, very strong low pressure system fueled by very cold air over Russia to the west of it, and it drew up very warm air from the tropics on the eastern side of it. And this contrast is what created that storm. The typhoon just happened to be there. But even without the typhoon, the storm still would have happened. Even if there was no typhoon, this still would have happened. This situation still would have happened because it was due to the low pressure system. It was not due to the typhoon itself. It had been shredded apart long before it got anywhere near Alaska. But I read article after article that says a typhoon hit Alaska and caused all this. See how it's extremely misleading. It's making it sound like a typhoon hit Alaska, and nothing could be further from the truth. But getting back to MJO manipulation, what they do is they enhance the convection in phase 4, 5, and 6 so that even if the convection naturally tries to move eastward, which it normally would, it usually follows a cycle. Even when it tries to go into the colder phases, they're constantly enhancing the convection in the warmer phases, so there's always convection going on, there's always rainfall happening. So what happens is the MJO, instead of going into phase 1, 8, 7 colder phases, it goes into the dead zone instead because they're enhancing convection. So instead of getting a colder period, the temperatures just go back to normal for a little bit, maybe slightly below average, and then when it naturally goes back around to the warmer phases, because they're enhancing it, we get more record warmth. during the time that the MJO is in the naturally warmer phases, because they're amplifying and enhancing it. And then when the MJO goes into the colder phases, or tries to, what happens is it just goes neutral. So we just get normal temperatures instead of below normal. See how that's how they make it appear global warming is going on. Like, yeah, we just got the first frost a couple nights ago, but you can see now we're back up in the 70s again. Because it's hard to get below average temperatures if they're constantly enhancing the convection. Even if overall we're in a cooling phase on the planet, which we are, the cooling is going to be felt the most in places where people don't live, because they're targeting the warmth where people live, where they'll buy into this man-made global warming. I emphasize man-made because there are times when the planet naturally warms. It's modulated by the sun. Like we did have natural warming between 1980 and around 2007. The climate naturally warmed during that period because we had 3 very high solar cycles consecutively. That warmed up the oceans. That's why we got so many hurricanes in 2005. But then this leads to why they're manipulating hurricanes in the MJO. Around 2007, a decline in hurricanes started. Around 2015, we had gone 8 straight years with no landfalls in the U.S., and people were questioning global warming. They came up with technology to actually try to create hurricanes and reverse that trend. The MJO manipulation started when a noticeable trend toward colder and snowier winters started around 2007. Or even before that, actually. Where the trend was toward colder, snowier winters, people were starting to question the narrative. So they came up with technology, similar technology. They started saying, well, hey, maybe we can manipulate the MJO to stay in the warmer phases for the eastern U.S. And that will knock the snowfall down. And if the snow increases in the Rockies and the mountains, well, that's just normal. They could get away because not many people live there. And it's easy to say, well, they're higher elevation. Yeah, they should be getting snow. So that's their strategy. Their strategy is weather modification. They can't control climate, but they can modify in a minor way where the jet stream goes and hide any global cooling that's going on. They can successfully hide by directing the troughs to go over the oceans or over unpopulated areas of the continents. And again, as I mentioned a few videos back, because most of the world's population lives in certain areas of the planet, if they can direct the ridges in the jet stream to stay over these populated regions for long periods of time, they can fool the world into thinking that global warming is being caused by man and have a reason to shut the economy down. And the reason why they came up with this modification of hurricanes in the MJO is because the natural trend around 2007 switched from warming to cooling of the planet. We were warming before 2007, but that was due to solar activity, not due to man. So what does that imply for this winter? Again, it depends on how successful they are. Because there is no warm blob in the Pacific. Some people are claiming the northern Pacific is record warm. Well, if it was, there'd be a high pressure over that region, and you'd have troughiness over North America downstream. You would have a constant tendency for ridging over that area of warm water. We have not seen ridging. We've seen troughing, which indicates the opposite, that the waters in that area are cold, not warm. If it's cold and stormy in that area all the time, the waters likely are colder than average. And then the Atlantic hurricane season, again, has continued to be a no-show. And again, they named yet another storm that should not have been named out in the Atlantic, Lorenzo. That was another joke. I mean, that was just a mass of clouds and a few showers and thunderstorms. It was not a tropical storm. I looked at the images. They're naming every disturbance in the Atlantic now. They're throwing a name on it because they do not want to see a way below average season. NOAA predicted a way above average season this year for hurricanes. I knew the prediction was absurd from the moment I heard it, because they're not forecasting weather intelligently. It's just like all their long-range forecasts are always above average temperatures. They very rarely will say an area is going to be below average way in advance. It's always, of course, MJO manipulation might have something to do with that forecast. If they manipulate the MJO, they know there's going to be a tendency for warmer than average temperatures most of the time over the U.S., even if the climate is cooling overall. I mean, we have an immense trough over the North Atlantic, but nobody's feeling that because it's all out over the ocean where the airplanes go and maybe a few ships. In true global warming, what happens is the subtropical highs, right, encircle the planet around 30 degrees north and south latitudes, get very strong, cover more area, leading to more heat waves in the summer over continental areas, including the U.S. That's what happened in the 30s. What caused the Dust Bowl was the subtropical high sits over the continental U.S. instead of further south in the summer. It leads to intense heat waves because that high pressure doesn't move. It sits there for weeks at a time. Or during the 50s as well. The reason why we haven't had those kind of heat waves lately is because solar activity is lower. The subtropical highs aren't as strong. And they're further south. So maybe Texas might get hot. The desert Southwest perhaps. But the heat doesn't extend into the rest of the U.S. With the high further south, it allows low pressure systems and cold fronts, and even in the summer, to come south out of Canada into the U.S., and this breaks up heat waves, and no sustained heat can get going. The same goes with hurricanes. If the Azores Bermuda High, which is part of the subtropical high, is a solid, strong, thick, high pressure over the Atlantic, then what happens is storms that form In the tropics, hurricanes get swept westward across the Atlantic and hit the U.S., hit the Gulf from the east. They curve north into the U.S. because the high forms an unbroken barrier from the Azores all the way to the western U.S. So these storms successfully get across the Atlantic, get into the U.S., the Gulf of Mexico, Mexico itself. When the high is very weak, it doesn't encompass one big layer. It forms just separate blobs. So it's much more difficult for a hurricane to make it across the Atlantic under a cooler scenario. They'll very frequently get picked up by a trough over the North Atlantic, get curved out to sea, even if they do manage to form. And the only way you can get a landfall in that kind of scenario is what we had last year with Helene. You ought to have a cutoff over the eastern U.S. to suck the storm far enough west to make a landfall. Otherwise, most of the disturbances get recurved back out to sea before they can even get near the U.S. because the high pressure that steers them isn't strong enough to get them across the Atlantic completely. The reason why we've had so many landfalls between 2016 and last year is because there were manufacturing storms in areas of the Gulf and southwestern Caribbean where they could circle around the weaker subtropical high pressure system and come at Florida from the west side instead of the east as they usually do, and the Gulf Coast from Louisiana on east. And here comes yet another person. Wow, this place is crowded today. The reason why Texas hasn't gotten much is because, again, with that subtropical high sitting in a further south position, it's going to be hard to steer a storm into Texas. Most of them curve to the east way before they get near Texas. That's why Texas hasn't gotten anything lately. And why most of the hits have been from Louisiana on east and west coast of Florida included in that. So will we get off scot-free this year with no landfalls in the U.S. for hurricanes? It's looking more and more likely by the day. Remember, we went an 8-year straight period with no landfalls of major hurricanes in the U.S. We went 8 straight years between 2006 and 2015. That was the reason they came up with this manipulation of the hurricanes around 2016. So that's going to be it. I already got 25 minutes on this video. I'll be back soon with another update.